Notice is hereby given of the regular meeting of the Board of Education of the Town of Westfield in the County of Union, New Jersey at 7:30 p.m. on the evening of Tuesday, November 18, 2014, in the boardroom of the Administration Building, 302 Elm Street in Westfield, New Jersey. The purpose of the meeting is to transact the regular business of the board and to transact any other business that may properly come before the board. This is to advise the general public and to instruct that it be recorded in the minutes that in compliance with Chapter 231 of the Public Laws of 1975, entitled the Open Public Meetings Act, the Westfield School Board on Friday, November 14, 2014, caused to be posted at the office of the Board of Education located at 302 Elm Street, Westfield, New Jersey, and delivered to the Westfield Leader, the Star Ledger, the Westfield Library, the Town Clerk of Westfield, the Alternative Press, and Patch.com, a meeting notice setting forth the time, date, and location of the meeting. Dana, can we do a roll call?
Rich Messessa?
Here.
Lucy Beagler? Ann Carey?
Here.
Mark Friedman?
Here.
Brendan Galligan? Roseanne Kirstes?
Yes.
Ginny Lights?
Here.
Gretchen Oley? Mitch Slater?
Here.
All right. Mark, could you lead us in the flag salute?
Sure. Please join me in the salute. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Announcements. Mark, anything on your end?
Yes. This is from the high school. On Saturday, November 29th, Westfield High School will host a first Tech Challenge robotics competition. FTC is designed for students in grades 7 to 12 to compete head-to-head using a sports model. Teams design, build, and program their robots to compete in an alliance format against other teams using sound engineering principles. The Westfield robotics team has 2 robots competing in this year's tournament season. The local November meet is the first time Westfield High School will host this event. The matches begin at 10 a.m. and continue until approximately 3 p.m. in the high school gym. The public is welcome to attend. There is no charge for admission. Advisors for the team include science teachers Valentino Scipione and Susan Marie Terra.
From the intermediate school, this fall, Roosevelt Intermediate School choral students were invited to accompany the New Jersey Festival Orchestra in a classical composition during performances held in both Westfield and Basking Ridge. Taught during the school year by vocal music instructors Sabino Lasco and Karen Ramiro, the students included Allison Brown, Meredith Case, Rachel Hamelberg, Brianna Hatch, Catlin Haviland, Emma Herber, Sarah Lade, Abby Jarecki, Savannah Stewart, Lauren Triarci, and Stephanie Zhao. Sorry about that. Names I mispronounced. 3 8th grade teachers, Stephanie Kowalski, Liz Schurer, and Daisy Limos, rounded out the sound and made connections with the students. The teachers and students were grateful for the invitation by music director David Rowe and agreed that it was a great weekend which will always be remembered. And from the high school, this weekend Westfield High School will present its fall drama, The Laramie Project. A cast of 21 Westfield High School students will play more than 80 characters. Performances will be held at 4 p.m. on Thursday, November 20th, and at 7:30 p.m. Friday, November 21st, and Saturday, November 22nd. Tickets for the Laramie Project, which are general admission seating, are $12 each. Tickets also will be on sale at the door on the evening of the shows.
Thank you. Mitch?
Yes, Girls Learn International, 37 students from Roosevelt, Edison, and the high school chapters of Girls Learn International attended the United Nations International Day of the Girl on October 11th, at which Westfield High School junior Isabella Gelfand was one of the speakers. GLI started in Westfield in 2003, and there are now 129 chapters partnered with 47 schools in 12 countries in a global movement for girls' access to education. Then on October 24th, 27 of the Roosevelt students in the chapter Skyped for 3 hours with their partner school in Kabul, Afghanistan. Our students then shared information about their favorite classes, what they're studying. They used props as they explained their favorite hobbies and sports, and showed a map of the U.S. and described where Westfield is located. Our students also sang a song of peace accompanied by Roosevelt vocal teacher Sabino Losco. Students from the high school in Afghanistan read a poem that they had written in English about what peace means to them. GLI advisor Karen Luce described the experience as truly magical. And on December 10th, which is International Human Rights Day, our RIS Girls Learn International chapter will host a free community event in the RIS auditorium from 7:30 to 9, featuring keynote speaker Soraya Sadid, author and founder of Help the Afghan Children. The event also will include inspirational speakers, poetry, music, and presentations from the RIS and WHS chapters of Girls Learn International.
I have two pieces of information, good news from Westfield High School. Congratulations to the Westfield High School girls volleyball team, who raised $40,000 for breast cancer research during its Pink Out fundraiser on October 17th. Congratulations to these girls. It's a wonderful amount of money. And congratulations to 7 students who achieved perfect scores in September on ACT standardized tests widely used for college admission criteria. The students are Jessica Wang, reading, Jason Liu, mathematics and science, Mary Mayo, science, Helen Mizrach, science, Caroline Stocking, mathematics and science, Dhruv Tiku, English, and Eli Wertschafter, mathematics. Congratulations to these students.
Thank you.
I have two. First, congratulations to the Westfield High School sophomore Alex Jackman on her most recent and perhaps most prestigious award she received for her video on autism awareness. She was awarded the top honor at the Boston International Kids Film Festival, the Peggy Charon Award for Excellence. This award is given each year to a young filmmaker who is using the medium of film to change minds and change lives, to make the world a better place. There are over 300 films submitted for consideration. It's fantastic. We saw that, right?
We did.
Presented to us?
Yes.
It's quite impressive. And from the intermediate schools. Last week, students at Roosevelt and Edison honored military veterans during school-wide assemblies held at both schools. World War II veteran Dr. Frank Freer addressed the filled gymnasium at Roosevelt and received the school's The Heroes Among Us Award. The Edison student body and staff heard from 2 guest speakers, Mr. Patrick Toohey, former U.S. Marine, and Dr. Derek Nelson, reservist in the U.S. Army. Both schools included musical performances and speeches by students and their principals in the Veterans Day programs.
Thank you.
I would like to take a moment to congratulate the new incoming board members, Peggy Oster and Christopher Langhart, as well as our current board member, Mark Friedman, who will be sworn into office on Tuesday, January 6th. At that time, they will begin a 3-year term of service in the school district. We are fortunate that other community members were ready to volunteer for a position on our board, including Michael Beelan and David Sexton, who also demonstrated their commitment to our schools. We welcome your continued interest and support.
Thank you. Dr. Dolan, nothing? All right. All Westfield Public Schools will hold a 4-hour session on Wednesday, November 26th. Schools will be closed on Thanksgiving Day, November 27th, and Friday, November 28th. We wish our entire community a wonderful holiday. The next Board of Education meeting will be held on Tuesday, December 9th. The complete agenda will be posted on the district website on December 5th. With that, we will recognize the public for agenda items only. All right, seeing no one come to the podium, we'll move to the superintendent's report.
Thank you. And tonight, the superintendent report focuses on the results of the assessments given to students last spring. These are results of the state assessments. And to present a review of those, I'd like to invite Mr. Paul Panera, our assistant superintendent for curriculum, to come up to the podium.
Thanks, Dr. Dolan. Hi, everybody. Good evening.
Good evening.
So the first thing we might notice on our screen is that you have a pencil and paper test being taken. So take a good look, because that's the last time we'll have standardized tests taken with a pencil and paper. Apples, I don't even know if they're allowed, but it's a cute picture. Tonight's presentation will be a quick an overview of the state testing that's offered, the different content areas and grade levels. We'll review the results. We can take some questions on the state testing before we move on to high school SAT, ACT, and AP, which is not state testing, but still really important indicators of how well our students are doing. So the first set of tests that the next slide shows includes grades 3 through 5, and so that's ELA and math. So grades 3 and 5 have ELA and math. Grade 4 includes science. The intermediate 6 through 8, ELA, English Language Arts, and math, and 8th grade has science as well. At the high school, we have the grade 11 HESPA, which is a graduation requirement. Some key terms as we move along. DFG stands for District Factor Group. It's a classification that takes into account a number of different indicators in any given community that suggests perhaps comparatively what districts might be good to look at side by side. So we are an I district. Westfield Schools is part of the I district factor group, and it ranges from, say, a double A to J. Double A being districts with socioeconomic, lower socioeconomic conditions, whereas the J districts are at the high end of that. And Westfield falls as an I. Here are some other key terms. We'll show the scale score mean tonight, along with the percentages of passing and advanced proficient. And so the breakdown there shows you that if you're a student who scores below 200 is considered partially proficient. We'll talk a little bit about how we support those students. And proficient would be 200 and above, with advanced proficient being between 250 and 300, 300 being the maximum. In addition to an overall passing rate or percentage in advanced proficient, we also get information by cluster. So there'll be a slide also that shows you the different clusters that the state tests for. And there they are. So the clusters for grades 3 through 5 in English Language Arts are there on your left: writing, persuasive, information, explanatory, reading, literature, informational text. In math, we have operations and algebraic thinking, number and operations, base 10, number and operations, fractions, measurement and data, and geometry. The categories for intermediate school, grades 6 through 8, writing, argumentative writing, narrative, reading, literature, informational text. And in math, ratios and proportional relationships, the number system, expressions and equations, geometry, statistics and probability, and functions. The cluster categories at grade 11 for the HESPA, the High School Proficiency Assessment, writing, expository, persuasive, reading, interpreting text, analyzing, critiquing text. In math, number and numerical operations, geometry and measurement, patterns and algebra, data analysis, probability and discrete math, knowledge, and mathematical processes, problem solving. So that gives you a sense of all the different skill sets that the tests are assessing for. So how do we use the data? Well, we analyze the results to facilitate student growth. It could be at a large scale where we look at grade levels or schools, or it could be on a more individual scale, which would be drilling it down to the student level. I mentioned the cluster categories a few moments ago. So the clusters help us monitor those skill sets. And in some cases, there might be some kind of signal that our curriculum could stand another look as far as the alignment is concerned, or it might suggest that there's an emphasis in maybe a grade level or one of the schools that maybe, that more emphasis needs to be placed on a particular cluster category. So we look for all those things. We monitor the consistency of the instruction by looking at the results as well. And we assess the programs as part of our ongoing curriculum review. And professional development, by looking at our student needs or by looking at the results, we have a sense of some areas that maybe our teachers would benefit from having some support in professional development, articulation. It could be even articulation at a department level meeting or a grade level meeting. So something about state mandated assessments, there are a few things to keep in mind about them. One is that at any given grade level, the assessments can change. They sort of get tweaked from year to year and from grade to grade at times. Different skills might be emphasized one year. Level of difficulty is not always the same from year to year. So like if the grade 3 assessment might seem more rigorous than the grade 4, for example, they're not scientifically aligned, I guess is what I'm saying, and the state doesn't necessarily have a calibration to make sure that they're all exactly the same as far as the level of difficulty. And we have to keep in mind that different cohorts of students, years of students that come through, some have different strengths than others in a given year, and that can change from year to year. And also the scoring protocols have changed over the years from the Department of Education. So just one example, a couple of years ago, there were 2 scores for writing responses, and that was cut to 1 year. And so there were concerns, or at least we know statistically that there has to be some sense of inter-rater reliability, and with 1 score instead of 2, that could lead to some inconsistency in the state, and some people thought that might have been the case. That was a couple of years ago. We'll talk a little bit more about the new testing in a couple of slides, so that might be different. The process for analyzing the test data that comes in. Everybody gets the data and starts pouring through it, but to look at it formally, Dr. Dolan and I will review with the principals and supervisors at building levels. We might do it at a large meeting and then break it down again individually with principals. The principals, as I said, they're reviewing it on their own locally in their buildings and also sharing it with teachers. It could be in a leadership team situation where they have their leadership team that goes through the data and provides some input on that, some information for the rest of the building by analyzing it. At the teacher level, they may look at results with the supervisors, including the clusters, and again, that can inform the, if curriculum is being developed that year, or really even just talking about what they think the results may have suggested if there's a certain flag or signal that comes out of the clusters, or the test, score in general. So individual score reports are really important. Those all get sent home to parents when they come in. And the same way that parents look through them for their individual students, the teachers do that as well for the students in their class, particularly with the intention to identify students who might need a little extra support or that they might differentiate toward. And that can go towards advanced proficient as well as maybe students who might be struggling. So the data can provide important tools for teachers to differentiate from all levels. And then, so examining the data, we start with the district level results, and you'll see those tonight. And so we'll look at the passing scores and also the scale scores. We put those in the context of the state and the DFG for comparative purposes, so we have a sense of what it means. A little earlier, you heard me mention that from year to year, the tests might not necessarily be aligned with their rigor. So by seeing it alongside our peers, we have a better sense of how we did. We look for trends over time. We do, at this point, I think we might have up to 6 years of year by year district and even school test scores that we can trace the trends for. And at times something does pop up. We analyze the cluster performance relative to state and DFG. I'll have a reference to how that measures up a little bit later. And we review the subgroup performance. So we have the total population, but we also have subgroup disaggregated information too, data, test score results. And that's important as well because the state tracks that as part of their annual performance reporting. So we'll dive in now with some of the graphics to give us a sense of how we do across the district. So in English language arts, in our testing last year from grades 3 on the left to the high school HESPA, you can see that, so we're the light blue of the 3 bars in the bar graph. And so the DFG or like schools will be the darker blue, and the state is the even darker blue, purplish looking. So we, you'll see the trend that Westfield typically is at, either at the I-district level with its peers, but more times than not, it's above it. So that gives you a sense of our total passing rate for English language arts through all the tested grades. Here's advanced proficient through the grades as well. This is sort of an example of what I was saying a little bit earlier about the different levels of rigor. It's not necessarily that all of the districts in New Jersey, including ours, get to a much more advanced level in high school. It's just a different type of test. So you're not really looking at the trend from left to right as so much as you're looking at the comparative placement of the bars along the continuum of the grades. So again, there's Westfield as the light blue, and that's advanced proficient for English language arts. Here's the scale score mean. So we have the proficiency level, the percentage of passing and advanced proficient, because sometimes students may, there might be a small number of students bunched up just below an area, say advanced proficiency, or just above. It's important to take into consideration the scale score mean. There are a couple times where that was important for us to see. What that just means is the average the overall average of the scores. So here you'll see that, I guess it looks around like 220 in third grade, and then as you go along, you can get a sense of it between 200 and 250 in all of our grades. And so those are the scale score means. And again, Westfield is typically at or above its peers. If we can go back to the other slide. So when we looked at sixth grade, for example, that's advanced proficient in English language arts. And so you said, well, that's not at or above. So, we look into that. I actually did look at the clusters, and nothing too dramatic. There's maybe nothing more than a 0.3 difference. So there was nothing too dramatic about that. But the reason I bring it up is because in the next slide for sixth grade, you see that for the most part, our averages, the scale score mean, are sort of side by side. So while we certainly look into the clusters and we see that there was writing, argument, and informative texts, as clusters that were a little less, those were like 11.3 for Westfield and 11.5 for the I district. So that starts, I'm sorry if it's getting a little bit too much into the numbers on that, but it just gives you a sense of why the scale score mean is important, because it lets us know a little bit more of the whole picture, let's say. Thanks, Dana. So we can go now to the scale score mean for, we did that. Right, you're right. Math, total passing. So again, same drill. That's total percent, total population passing across the board in math. So we can look at advanced proficient next. And again, we're the light blue, and typically at or above. In some cases, very much above. The scores, and there's the scale score means. That is a good performance on the part of all the I districts, even the state to some extent. Yeah. Okay, so then a quick look at the science grades, the scores for fourth and eighth. What does it assess? Life science, physical science, earth science, the knowledge and application of the sciences. So here's our total passing, grades 4 and 8. And the next is the advanced proficient. And there's the scale score mean. We're going to pause just for a second. Question from our Vice President,
I just
Roseanne.
noticed, did you look at, is it the same individual students? It seems like we hover around a little over 90% passing. Is it in general the same students who aren't passing each content area, or are they different students? Did you look at that specifically?
Oh, yeah. So are you talking about whether it's science or language arts or math?
Or language arts.
Yes.
They seem to hover around the same number of like 90-something% pass.
Yes. So we have a number of ways to create a roster of those students. One is through going through the individual scale reports or score reports. There's also a section of New Jersey Smart called Ed Analyzer. So we can, that's really cool. It's for all intents and purposes a spreadsheet that you can sort. So you can sort for everybody below this and everybody below that. And in some cases, it shows us that while the passing rate, so you may be partially proficient, students who aren't passing, you might find that they are close though. So part of the state's move towards a growth model is to be able to account for the fact that, let's make sure that students are growing. They may not all be jumping to passing. Without getting too far into it, NCLB was all about pass-fail. So the waiver of NCLB to enable us to go to a different assessment system was that it would be a growth model instead of a pass-fail model. So that was one of the criticisms of NCLB. So back to Roseanne's question, we were able to generate rosters of those students. It informs who might be in some of our support situations. But yeah, so we do. Okay, and that's the scales. So test results. I guess so in a nutshell, you've heard me say it. I didn't want to beat it to death. I think in the 4 years that I've presented, or the 4 times that I've presented for the results, pretty much the same consistent pattern comes up, that Westfield schools consistently perform at or above the level of its peers. So that consistency is really great. So standards and skills alignment, the scores over time, as I just mentioned, they also suggest that we are closely aligned to the standards. If there's a drop-off at a year where new standards were in place or put in place, that would suggest we have to go back and look at how we align those new standards. That's not something we've come across, but it is something that you look for. It could be subtle, so maybe it's in there sometimes when we switch curriculums or move into new standards. History supports that we are closely aligned. So that's a big reason for why, or it's a big purpose for how the assessments, why the assessments are useful. So without getting too much into the whole park scene, that's the testing, the online testing that starts in the spring. A quick overview would just be that, so the platform changes. It's no longer paper and pencil, it's all online. We had a field test last year, which I think it was in maybe 5 or 6 of our schools, and there were a number of classrooms that were selected to pilot what the testing was like, and that went well. That went on throughout the country, and there were a lot of bugs ironed out. We are doing a lot to make sure that we're prepared for this spring. We scour the parkonline.org website to find new updates. I met just last week. I meet monthly with Scotch Plains, Springfield, and Cranford to discuss the different things we're hearing about it. It could be something about headphones and how we have earbuds cleaned between sessions. I mean, right down to the nitty-gritty, how we're supporting students in preparing, and teachers as well. Little things like the vocabulary used in the testing might be different than what the students might be used to. So there are certain practice tests on parkonline.org that can help with that vocabulary. One example is repetitive subtraction is actually another term for division. So it's going to make sure that students are familiar with that, and so they're not scratching their heads. So there's a lot of little details that we're on top of and doing everything we can to anticipate. So we're preparing for that. We are prepared as far as the standards are concerned, because as the new standards are released, we have meetings and articulations to incorporate them into the existing curriculum documents. And the fact that New Jersey CUSAC, that's the monitoring system that comes in every 3 years, we did well there with regard to curriculum. So we can be confident that we're well aligned. And also that teachers and students have been practicing, so as far as park goes. So we're aligned, we've been practicing, as I said, and we'll be prepared for this new format. And by the way, a couple other interesting things are just, touchpad, moving mice. We have some links that we can practice with students where if they're really young, they're popping bubbles by using their mouse or touchpad, and that gets them, familiar with moving their eye across the screen, maybe scrolling. So there's a lot of little things that go beyond the standards that we think are important. So back to the testing results in general, it's all about supporting the needs of students. So that's what the data enables us to do. And here are just a couple of ways that we do that, or examples even. So we've provided elementary teachers with professional development in literacy really over the last 3 years. Balanced literacy specific to a model that is often referred to as the readers and writers reading workshop, writing workshop model. And so we've supported that in significant fashion over the last 3 years to reinforce and support our English language arts program. Something that's exciting and we're putting together now for the next round of significant new standards is between 2014 right now and 2016, we will be, along with everyone else in New Jersey, implementing the national next generation science standards, which have a heavy STEM influence. There's more engineering, for example, in there. So we're rolling all of those out, and that has to be implemented by 2016. We started that really last spring and summer by working with, at that point it was Milburn and Summit, and now we're working with a few other districts, and we've put together really 5 districts that will be designing modules, designing units that incorporate the new standards and take the existing curriculum and move it forward with the new standards. So that's exciting stuff. So we're really happy that we've got a leg up on that. We have some time, but we'll get that, you know, we're ahead on that, which is great. And we're having a lot of fun with some of our peer schools. And we've enhanced our academic support at grades 6 through 8 with the support of the Board of Education and the Curriculum Instruction and Programs Committee of the board. And we've provided ongoing support for teachers who are using assessment data to achieve their student growth objectives. So as teachers have been implementing the new state evaluation process that includes tracking student growth, we've provided a good deal of support for them to develop their baseline assessments, find out where students are in the beginning of the year, and then mark their progress along the way. So that has been another way that we've supported through professional development. So here comes some assessment results that are not part of the state mandated programs, and so we'll be looking at those. Here's the 2014 SAT mean comparisons. So these are the scores. Westfield performing well above the state and the nation. The College Board does not provide district factor groupings. It's just state by state comparative data they give you, and then of course the nation. So there you see, you see the 3. We had a lot of perfect scores, 34 in SATs, and there's a little bit of a quick breakdown in there. So there's 3 in reading, 13 in mathematics level 2, 6 in math, 3 in chemistry, 1 in molecular biology, and 8 in writing. ACT, a lot of students are also taking ACT or in lieu of SAT are taking ACT. And this demonstrates or shows us the English, math, reading, and science performance there. Westfield, state, and nation, same kind of deal. That's the data that's available. Westfield performs above the state and nation across the board in those areas as well. And there are some perfect scores to be bragged about too in ACTs. 34 there as well. So there are 34 perfect scores in ACT and SAT. Complete coincidence, but there it is. And you see the breakdown: 5 in reading, 10 in math, 8 in science, 5 in English, 5 in math level 2, and 1 in Spanish. Okay, and there's a 4-year summary of our advanced placement performance. So just to quickly go over the top so we know what we're looking at. The first column is the year. The second column is the courses that we offer. And the next one is the subjects, tests taken. Sometimes we have more tests taken than courses we offer. And I think that's self-explanatory. Westfield scores 3 and above is sort of the magic number as far as saying that a program is strong. So we have that percentage there as well. And then the last 2 columns, that's some comparative data for us. So if you want to look at, say, the column 3, the scores 3 and above, and then 4 and 5, you'll see that, for example, in 2010, Westfield had 90%, 90.6% of our students scoring at 3 and above. Again, that's that magic number that suggests strong results. And that's compared with the state's scores of 73.9%, 3 and above, and internationally 60.2. And then you can take that all the way down to 2014, where you see 91.7 versus 74.2 and 61.3. So actually, those numbers across the board are consistent in all 3 categories. That's good stuff. This is just another way to look at the same AP results. Westfield's the big blue bar on the left, purplish blue, and that just reinforces visually what we just looked at in tables. Oh, yeah. And so I think that's a good demonstration of our consistency and our tradition of excellence here at Westfield School. So with that being said, I'd be glad to discuss any things that popped up in your mind while we were going through it. Ginny.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you very much for reviewing this with us. I have a number of questions. Do you have an opinion on the inter-rater reliability results based on the fact
Yeah.
that we moved from 2 to 1 readers?
Right. I think it was 2 years ago where it was most noticeable, and I think our region didn't suffer from it as much, but, and Dr. Dolan could add to that as well. I think there were other regions that said it really hit hard there because they may have had a scorer who just simply scored differently than maybe others. Now, they try to calibrate all of that. The other thing about inter-rater reliability is someone might get fatigued, so by the time they get to the end of a whole day of scoring, it's good if there's another person, because in the old school method, as soon as 2 tests are scored, and we're talking about the writing piece, for example, as soon as 2 writing sections or pieces are scored more than one apart, one point apart, someone else has to read it. So there's a flag that goes up and says that. So we noticed, and I don't know if it was all that well announced, but when you started having, what was it, odd numbers or only even numbers? The math, yeah. So it suggested that you didn't have inter-rater reliability going on because of the way the scores all fell. So yeah, that's that one.
So I think it's something to watch for because it's concerning.
Right.
I think it's concerning. I think we all need to be aware. Inter-rater reliability means that you have 2 people reading the same essay and using the same rubric, and it's a measure against bias, so that the outcomes are that the readers are trained and they're supposed to have the similar, if not a same result when they read the writing piece. I just think I was very happy when originally we had the focus of 2 readers so that there was the reliability built in.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just good.
It's good practice.
It's just good practice, yeah. You're
It's
right.
a better practice than 1 reader. So I do have concerns about that. So this is a lot of data that you gave us, but I feel a little bit like the emperor's new clothes, because I don't know what it says about our district over time. I know it says that regarding our peer DFG group and our state, we have performed well, but I have no clue how we've done in our own personal trend. So what can you tell us about that, and when will you tell us anything? It just seems to me that this is one of the most important meetings and pieces of information that a Board of Education can get, see, understand, analyze, and work toward
Sure.
improving. So I'm feeling like I don't really have any information.
Okay, well, we do have tons of information, and with regard to, and I'll clarify, make sure I know exactly what you mean, but, so we do have a minimum of 6 years per school, per content area, per grade. You'd be here all night, and I'm not suggesting that it's not important data. So this was decided upon based on, a little bit of what we've done in past history, but the principals are very eager to get that data every year because you can see the trend lines. That needs to include, in my opinion, and it does, the comparative data. So when we see those lines, it's always DFG and our district, because there are years where that test, you can see it there. The test changes, and we come down like 8 points, like, uh-oh, you know, the year before third graders scored, you know, say 90, and this next year third graders scored, you know, 82, and that's a big deal. But then if you look at the peers in the years, you see that everybody came down. And the thing that we really look for is when there are those blips, what I like about Westfield most, and of course, it's not here, but I'll tell you what it looks like. When there are blips, it's exaggerated more in, say, the DFG or the state. Actually, it's really fun to look at that. The state, whenever there was a change, the state really fell, let's say. And then the DFG less, because for whatever reason, kids might, you know, they're more resilient, they self-correct, the district might correct. And so we also look for that with regard to Westfield. So we do have that, Ginny. You know, I could bring it to a SIP meeting if you're interested. We just have so much of it. But your point is well taken. That's a very valuable tool for us. And we have it school by school, grade by grade, content by content.
And I think part of the reason why you see the changes, you can certainly look at 6 years, but you can't expect that at 87% passing this year is equivalent to this, because one of the main reasons is they've been adjusting the test to the new standards.
I understand.
Right, so.
I understand it has not been easy to have any comparative analysis, because you have to take into account the underlying assumptions and the criteria that's changed, the scaling that's changed, the rigor that's changed. But I just don't have anything to go on here. I don't know where major growth has occurred. I don't know where minor growth has occurred. I don't know if growth has not occurred. And as you pointed out, our No Child Left Behind waiver is predicated on growth analysis.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know where or why or wherefore we haven't met those growth targets, and if there's something that should be, if there's additional help that the board can give based on those results. So it's really from that kind of outcome point of view as to where can the board be of assistance, either from a resource or a money or an activity point of view, so that the community knows that we're seriously involved in achievement as our highest priority.
So, I mean, it is fine. We do have the
Fine.
data, the administrators have the data, so we can make the data available to either curriculum committee or to the board, whatever the board's pleasure is.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not looking for, I understand you have reams of it, and I understand you have piles of it, and a lot of analysis that's done. But is there any way to distill to some level of comfort that we can have some kind of information that summarizes
So one thought,
anything?
based on what you just said, one thought would be, so we have these reams, but a few examples of where we did see some. Because, not to suggest that it's all, not worth looking at, but that same trend is everywhere. Like, so you see the lines across 6 years and we're at or above. I mean, it's the same thing year in and year out. And, but I think what you're saying is a really good suggestion. So when it's not standard and when there does seem to be something different going on, maybe pull that and include that here.
I'd appreciate that for sure.
Very good. And that doesn't mean we wait till next year. We can do it sooner than
Right.
that.
It's, the tendency is to question whether whether you want to expose information, because you certainly don't want to just provide it as a target for negativity. On the other hand, it's a target for growth, and if more growth needs to be supported in a certain area, then we certainly want to be able to know that and be mindful of it
Sure.
and support it in the appropriate way.
I'm sure, absolutely. I'm trying to think of one that might jump out. I know that like 6th grade thing was something we looked at and didn't amount to too much, but they're absolutely, the growth lines can tell us a lot.
And this is not based on the test data that was taken. This is based on the last prior year of what were the names of the tests?
So the New Jersey Ask,
The NJS
and
tests?
then the HESPA, yeah.
This
Last
is
year.
last year, the
This is-
spring,
This is NJS test result.
and
Right, from
HESPA.
214.
And HESPA,
yeah,
right, okay.
2014, yeah.
Okay.
So along those lines, then, are we basically starting from scratch next year? I mean, I
Absolutely.
know that we're gonna have a means of comparison to just, you know,
Yes.
our factor group and all of that, but there's that 6 years of data, we're basically, there's no way to compare, correct?
Right, and for that reason, the state, with regard to its ratings and comparative listings, they need to establish a new baseline. It wouldn't make sense, how do you take the old New Jersey Ask system and somehow make that match the new system? What they struggle with is that part of receiving federal funds is to have accountability. That means you are absolutely tracking how schools are doing and those that, you know, achievement gaps and things of that nature. So their challenge is to recognize that they really have no, you know, they have no baseline data to move to show growth from the year before to the next level with Park. But then, you know, so they get started now. And so they have to build the baseline and go from there. So the accountability piece does not really kick in for 2 years, is it? But as far as SGPs and teachers are concerned.
Yes, as far as SGPs and teachers, that's correct, 2 years, yes.
So student growth percentiles is marking how students are grown on Park, for example, and then in some way, you know, connecting that to schools and even teachers. So there'll be plenty more of that. in the
So that'll be
future.
based on 2015 Park as a baseline, and then 2016 will be the first growth analysis
Yes.
after that baseline.
Yes,
And we won't hear about that until February of 2017.
That's right.
that's right. You're good.
Okay, I'll tell you, I'll listen.
Although they are hoping, actually, I'm sorry, they are hoping that
Yeah, A
as,
speedier analysis.
yes, that,
I understand.
not in the first year.
Right.
But starting in the second year, there'll be a speedier analysis because it will be computerized. Yeah. That's the,
Do we know what the scoring system is yet? Is it similar at all to the NJ Ask in terms of proficiency, advanced proficient?
When we did no,
No.
I would say no, because it's different. But when we did the field test, we received no data back. It was just so that they could see where
Right.
glitches were.
Right.
I've been to a lot of meetings, we haven't had that. It's
It
like
was
right
a-
in your face obvious, and nobody said, well, how?
It was more of a tactical
Yeah.
analysis, I guess,
Yeah.
of the protocols.
right. I would say because the next test is computerized, which is very different, and because it's based on different standards, and it's definitely a different type of test, all focus has been on trying to prepare our students for that, making sure we educators understand how it is different. And different, again, in different ways. It's not just, the questions are written differently. There are different levels of, in one set of data, for example, you have multiple questions regarding it. Students have to go back and forth between multiple sources of data to answer certain questions, and they're doing it on the computer. And some of it is, some of the computer work is pretty easy, and our kids will have no problem. Some of it may be a little different. And we're also, not just we, but across the board, I'd say districts are concerned, will the fact that it's computerized make even worse the achievement gap? You know, students who have access at home and spend a lot of time, you know, using technology in whatever way, whether it's a game or whether it's education, versus other students who don't have access at home and only have access in school. So we've been trying to look out for that as well. We really are working very hard to make sure our students are ready for Park, because it's going to be very different, and we don't know all the answers. We certainly are online all the time on parkonline.com, trying to find out as much as we can. We've had a lot of professional development, and we keep working on it. It's quite a shift for us. I think it'll be good eventually, but we're anxious about it.
So this came up in SIP. So currently, every student has to pass the HESPA
Right.
to graduate. And it's my understanding that we don't really know yet if that is going to be true for Park.
It's not, sorry.
Is that what you said?
Yeah, it's, in the immediate future, it is not because it's new. I just put this in the bulletin now to
Yeah,
staff.
they have sent out guidance regarding that. There are different options. So students who do not pass the
That's fine.
park, and students have to pass the park in their math classes in high school and in their language arts classes, 9, 10, and 11. Students who don't pass that, there are other options. They actually list the other tests that will be allowed to show proficiency. I believe it includes
Oh, right, and some are SAT,
So they
minimum
include
SAT
SATs
scores,
and
minimum
ACT.
ACT scores.
and a few other tests. There's a whole list of other tests, so if students, I think the hope will be that the majority of students will pass on Park, but if not, there is quite a list of ways that they can pass, especially for the first few years.
And that demonstrates, sorry,
You could have a student who didn't pass Park and didn't even take the SAT or the ACT.
Yes.
And I could certainly see that happening, so.
There are other tests as well that are not college-ready tests. There are other ones that are on that list.
the idea, and this is a credit to the state, is that because of, as Gretchen said, the reliability, especially initially, of the data that's coming out, it wouldn't be right to affect student graduation as a result of that. So, and I don't know if this is how it went in other states when Park was rolled out sooner, but at least in New Jersey, they were savvy enough to put some discretion in the hands of the local districts. So, you know, it is SAT, ACT, but others, as Dr. Dolan pointed out. So I think that was smart on the part of the state, because you can't put all those eggs in a statistically, you know, it's not going to be statistically significant or reliable for a couple of years, and at least it sounds like they're aware of that. Jenny?
Dr. Dolan just mentioned achievement gap, which I also wrote down at the same time you were saying it for a different reason. 13 years ago when I joined the board, one of the first pieces of information that I received that was distributed to the board had to do with achievement gap. And again, we haven't spoken about that maybe in 5, 8 years. And I'm wondering if that's something that that is one of those areas where we had spent time trying to understand differences and supportive measures and activities to help all students to perform at some higher level than they were at currently. And I would appreciate if there was some information that we could have about, over time, where Westfield's achievement gap information has been, is now, is leading.
Sure, we could definitely we absolutely do that at every level, looking at that. At every level, we don't have, you know, many groups, subgroups.
I understand.
Right. But for any groups that we do have where there's a significant number of students, we absolutely look at what are the differences and what patterns can we see.
Right, because I know that we have to report some measures based on the population numbers. So that some of it certainly is available.
Yes, that's absolutely part of the work that we described that we do at the school level, is definitely
Right,
part
and
of
I
it.
think that's really important to understand, are we keeping pace? Are we, you know, behind pace? Are we actually, are our measures showing that there is less of a difference in mean scores or median
Yeah.
scores? I just don't know. But again, I don't have any information, and I can't compare it to anything because it's not something that we've talked about recently, and I think it's very important.
Yeah, it's very important. And as Dr. Dolan said, you know, we do look at it building by building and subgroup by subgroup. Yeah, we have to look at it a couple ways because there really just aren't enough students in the subgroup population, and it fluctuates a lot. So nevertheless, you can see where you need to be looking. And so there are, for the most part, it goes back to Roseanne's question where you need to break it down by pulling the students' names out who maybe didn't pass or aren't growing, but point well taken.
Yeah, and truthfully, some of our work in that area is what led to some of the summer programs that
Right.
we've had over the last few years, because we were looking at ways to try to assist students who needed some additional support and maybe some additional preparation before each school year started.
I understand. I'm just not sure that what you've done, what we've done, has resonated with board members and the public as to why and the results and how important it is in the long term. I mean, certainly we focused on children that we think need the support, need the help, but there is a bigger picture and a bigger conversation, so that if someone's reading the newspaper and all of a sudden there's an article on the achievement gap, Westfield hasn't mentioned the words achievement gap in years. Would the public even think that there was one, had one? Do we know about it? Are we doing something about it?
But we've absolutely talked about the concept at this table.
No, I understand,
Right.
I understand, but I
Every
just,
year, a few times, actually.
I just really think that it's important that we have the context at the table to understand why are we doing certain things, what is it doing for us? Why is it important that resources go in these directions? Because the outcomes are very meaningful and they're very important.
Right.
Any others?
So,
Thank you. All right, thank you very much. Sure. Anything else? Superintendent?
No, that is it.
All right. I'd ask the board to approve the minutes of the board meeting held on October 21, 2014, and the private minutes of October 21, 2014. I have a second.
Second.
Thank you, Ann. Any comments or questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. Move to personnel, Mark.
I'd like the board to consider personnel items numbers 1 through 28. Second, Ginny, thank you. Any questions, comments? Dana, please?
Rich Besenza,
Yes.
Ann Carey,
Yes.
Mark Friedman,
Yes.
Brendan Gallagher,
Yes.
Roseanne Kirschner,
Yes.
Ginny Light,
yes,
Gretchen Oleg,
Yes, I abstain as to 28.
Mitch Slater.
Yes.
That's it.
All right, facilities, I didn't have a report. Dana, is there anything to report out on the roofs or anything else? All right.
Are we done? Are they done? Everything's done with the roofs?
Just about, they're still
I'll
working
punch
on
items and
minor-
stuff.
Minor closeout documents.
It's the seating,
Great.
the cement and the seating. They're putting up with it. All right, thank you. Long-range planning, Ginny.
yes. Long-range planning met November 13th, last week. The topic was school day starting time. A parent had contacted the board and Dr. Dolan and said they were interested in influencing and persuading, I think, the board to look into changing the school start times, indicating that the legislature was also, the state legislature was also interested in studying this interest. Dr. Dolan brought Mr. Panaro, Mr. Weissman, Jim DeSarno, Westfield High School Assistant Principal Linda King, Supervisor of Fine Arts, K-12, and Maureen Mazaris, Supervisor, Guidance, Advising for the district, together as resources and to do research and to present to the committee findings. Ms. Mazaris started by telling us that the American Association of Pediatrics has a position on changing school start times, feeling that 8:30 a.m. or later is best to align with the sleep patterns of adolescents, intermediate and high school children. And we were told that, and reviewed our own start times. Our intermediate schools start at 8:15, our high school starts at 7:30, or second period 8:17. So we agreed that Westfield is not that far off from the American Association of Pediatrics suggested start time. And Mrs. Mazaris told us that while the pediatrician's position can't be argued, their position needs to be put into context of bigger issues. Bigger issues being whatever we do must be done with careful thought that takes into account the culture of Westfield Public Schools. And that was kind of the thoughtfulness that we approached some of the conversation moving forward. There was research brought to us from school in Minnesota, where they had instituted a change in later state start time, but because the full community adjustment had to be made, they could not sustain the start time. They were kind of out of sync with other schools, peer schools that they had to interact with. Not only after-school activities, athletic contests, and other ways of interacting that our students have with their peers. So it was difficult for them to sustain this, the time. They had moved back to an 8 a.m. start. They changed their start time back to an earlier start. So some of the questions that were raised at the committee table were, how long would it take for a community to actually shift in full to an earlier start time later? It would be a large adjustment for everyone within the community.
Later.
Oh, a later
Yeah.
start time.
6:30.
It would be a huge adjustment for many people concerned, including parents. Job start times might change, commuting times might change, after-school support of children, younger children, by older siblings might have to change. A question was brought up, how would later start time enable children to go to bed? Would they go to bed at the same time? Would they actually push their entire schedule later? Would they get tired earlier? Would they have to do their homework for the longer period of time? Would they actually capture and retain the hour or half an hour that they gained if school start time were moved? Would schools have to have lights on their fields to provide enough time for athletic contests and athletic practice during the times of the year when it's darker? Research did have lighted facilities for their students, so that might not have been an issue for them to consider initially. Question, would children be well behaved in the morning if they were left at home and their parents had to go to work at the same work start time, but school didn't start as early? As I said, would older children be able to take care for younger ones if the timing was changed after school? There were some questions then separately from moving a start time to the amount of homework that students have in general. And of course, that's a different issue, question of overstimulation that students now find themselves in a situation where they might do better. Could they do better managing and budgeting their time? Is there a time management issue with students and why they need to stay up later? So these are, it's not just a question of students needing longer periods of sleep or their circadian time period different from the time that school starts. Extracurricular activities might look different from the intermediate and high school. Would there be a significant difference if we started high school from compromise and not damage lives and save activities? What would it look like? Would we lose a 9-period day? I mean, there were a lot. Westfield Public Schools is one of few schools still that hold a 9-period day for student choices of courses. If we didn't have a 9-period day and we locked off the first period, 1,200 kids wouldn't have an assignment during the first period of the day. What would they be doing? Would they have to be managed and supervised in a different way? Is pursuing, and then a real question, is pursuing this for a 20-minute delay enough to benefit a try? Should it really be tried? So these questions and this sustained kind of uncertainty of what direction we're going in addition to the fact that the state legislature has indicated that they're interested in studying a later school day, led us to the conclusion that this is more than just a Westfield question. This is more than one community's question. This is more likely a broader question for regionalism or across the state, as to how students interact and how schools interact with each other, because we are a very interconnected group of educational institutions. So I guess the answer was, this is a bigger agenda than our community can tackle alone. And committee agreed to put this on the side and see where, and if other communities were coming, other school districts were coming down on any side of the conversation, and then what's happening with this legislation that may request that a study take place for a later start.
So I think this is a hot button issue. I mean, it's certainly, you can't read a newspaper or
Right.
some publication without this being raised. And so would you be willing to circulate notes to the full board for those of us who weren't at the meeting? Because it's
Yes.
useful for us to know. A lot of those issues that you raised, I would never have come to on my own. So it would be helpful if we could just have those to the extent the conversation comes up when we're out in the community.
Yes, I'm sorry that I didn't get to provide the notes prior to the meeting, but
Yeah.
it was just a couple of days ago. But I really want to thank Dr. Dolan for bringing in a variety of resources to us. It was very helpful to hear from especially representatives of counseling and attendance office and assistant principal at the high school, and it made, and additionally, assistant superintendents, it made the conversation broader, and it gave us a lot of food for thought. Yeah, I will be circulating my notes.
Thank you.
Yeah. That's it.
All right, great, thank you. Policies, Gretchen?
Yes. I would like to ask the board to consider policy items number 1 and 2. Can I have a second, please? Thanks, Ann. So policies under item 1 that are on for first reading today, there were 3 policies where the language of the administrative code had changed significantly. All of these policies were looked at by the administration and before they came to the policy committee, and the recommendation was that we adopt the language that was put forth by Strauss Esme, because it tracked the language of the administrative code better and reflected more recent. And so after reading through them and asking questions, the committee agreed with that assessment, and we are recommending that the board adopt we adopt the Strauss Esme versions of those policies for the district, which I think were circulated to y'all last Friday. And then with respect to the items listed in number 2, we have, which we've actually seen, the board's seen recently, 2460 is a broad special education policy that of course tracks the language of the law. And Dr. Weissman felt like it was logistically easier and much more comprehensive and that policy contains all of the information that is then subsequently broken down into the policies listed here. And just for purposes of keeping our policies up to date, because this is an area of the law that changes so often, and because all of these were subsumed into the bigger 2460, he felt it was just cleaner if we just had the one big policy. And certainly, I think you all know that when we have families who are going through our special education system, they're given so many resources in addition to just our policy. They're giving the booklets and lots of other reference areas to go to. So the policy committee agreed with his assessment, and so we're recommending that we abolish those subsections of the 2460 policy. Does anybody have any questions?
I think that makes a lot of sense.
It did. I mean, yeah, I think when we first So we were all a little alarmed. We're like, what are we doing? Why are we getting, once we all sat down and took a look at the big policy, it made much more sense. So I agree that it just streamlines things for us.
So you didn't have any changes to 2460?
We've already seen that. We
Okay.
recently had just, in the regular course of review, the 5-year annual review, we had seen it, so it's been recently touched and updated.
Got it. Thank you.
Richard Matheson?
Yes.
Ann Carey?
Yes.
Mark Friedman?
Yes.
Brenda Galligan?
Yes.
Roseanne Kursted?
Yes.
Ginny Lights?
Yes.
Gretchen Oleg?
Yes.
Mitch Slater?
Yes.
And I'd like to ask the board to consider policy items number 3 and 4. Can I have a second?
Second.
Roseanne, thank you. Those are all, we are adopting, the policies listed number 3 for second reading, and then the 4th one is being abolished because the statute has been repealed. Anybody have questions on those? You've seen them before.
Richard Matheson?
Yes.
Ann Carey?
Yes.
Mark Friedman?
Yes.
Brenda Galligan?
Yes.
Roseanne Kursted?
Yes.
Ginny Lights?
Yes.
Gretchen Oleg?
Yes.
Mitch Slater?
Yes.
And finally, I'd like to ask the board to affirm the superintendent's decision on HIB incident 15E01 for the reasons set forth therein. Can I have a second? Dana?
Richard Matheson?
Yes.
Ann Carey?
Yes.
Mark Friedman?
Yes.
Brenda Galligan?
Yes.
Roseanne Kursted?
Yes.
Ginny Lights?
Yes.
Gretchen Oleg?
Yes.
Mitch Slater?
Yes.
Before we move on, can I just ask y'all a question, just a logistics question? So when we have, I'm just thinking about killing trees, to be quite honest. So now that we have the new BOE working group up, I'm just curious how you feel about, instead of copying and disseminating the policies, hard copies, if they were just posted on the working group. I know some of us are more tactical than others, but if it's possible to save a tree, I wanted to get your thoughts on how you'd feel if the policy committee did that from now on.
Great idea.
Could I suggest the use of the word tactile as opposed to?
Would I say tactical? Sorry. Maybe that's just how we say it down south,
Well, when you come north,
It
it's
sounds
gonna
good.
change. When in Rome.
Sounds good to me. You would post, though, you often do the marked ones also.
The track changes?
Yeah. to say-
Yeah, I mean, I assume we could probably do both. You have to see the track changes ones, in my opinion, or else
Yeah.
it's not of any value,
Right.
really. And so,
Yeah, as long as you post everything, it's fine with me.
okay, I'll talk to Rosemary about it and we'll see what makes the most sense from her perspective too. Okay, and I don't have anything further. Thank you.
All right. Curriculum, instruction, and program. Roseanne.
I'd like to ask the board to approve items 1 and 2. May I have a second? Thank you, Ginny. The first item is for the district field trips, and the second item is a 2014-15 Progress Targets Action Plan for McKinley School. And just to reiterate that plan, because McKinley receives Title I funding, the Progress Target Action Plan needs to be updated every year, and this year it was updated to increase the instructional time for the resource room from 60 to 90 minutes for grades 1 through 5, implementing in-class support instruction for special needs students in grades 3 through 5, and implementing Common Core Aligned Language Arts curriculum and providing professional development to enhance instruction, as well as to create and implement a summer reading program for targeted assistance for identified students. So that was just to reiterate that. Are there any questions?
Richard Matheson?
Yes.
Ann Carey?
Yes.
Mark Friedman?
Yes.
Brenda Galligan?
Yes.
Roseanne Kursted?
Yes.
Ginny Lights?
Yes.
Gretchen Oleg?
Yes.
Mitch Slater?
Yes.
Now I'd like to ask the board to approve items 3 and 4. May I have a second? Thank you, Anne. Item 3 is to approve the following curricula for first reading, which are quite a few curricula from the gifted program for grades 3 through 5. I think you did see these curricula in June, and then they were also reposted on our working website that Gretchen had mentioned. And are there any questions? because you also did get notes from me on these. So do you have questions individually? Okay, I'm just gonna say a few topical things that these curricula are very, project and problem-based, and kids are, really expected to understand and grasp concepts quickly and then apply them in, interdisciplinary ways. So even, within the advanced math topics or the life science exploration, and the living together in communities under the law, it's all about integration and application of knowledge and skills. Any questions on that? No? Okay, and then the number 4 is to approve the math curricula for second reading that we discussed last meeting. So does the board have any questions? Do we have any questions or comments from people in the public? Questions or comment? You can come to the podium. State your name and address.
My name is Amisha Mehta. I live at 41 Carroll Road, and I am the co-chair of the Gifted Parents Committee. One issue that's been brought up to us by parents is that often the curriculum in the gifted ed curriculum covers topics that are then covered in the regular school curriculum. So for example, something will be covered in 3rd grade in gifted ed and then re-covered in 4th grade. It's covered much more in depth in 3rd grade in the gifted program, and then when they go to 4th grade, it's covered at a much broader level. So this sometimes presents an issue for students because the students, for example, something that's come up often is they've learned that there's 4 states of matter in gifted ed, and then the next year in regular ed they'll say there's 3 states of matter, and a child will raise their hand and say, well, what about the 4th? It creates a bad situation between the teacher and the child because the teacher feels like the child's being a smart aleck and the child is just, restating what they've learned in the gifted program. So that was just a question if those redundancies have been looked at. And whether or not something can be, it's just a question that a lot of parents have come to us with.
Absolutely. The example you just provided is for science, and the elementary science curriculum is being revised as we speak. So I would think that those redundancies are being looked at. It hasn't come to the SIP committee yet, so we haven't seen if those redundancies, but I would think that they are certainly being looked at. And as for the social studies, this K-5 social studies was recently revised, and now the gifted is being revised, and the social studies supervisor was involved with both, and I'm pretty sure she looked at those consistencies, but
The communities
before we
law
go-
has come up
right,
a lot.
Before we go to second reading, we'll certainly take a look to
Great.
make sure.
Thank you.
Yes.
So could I just ask a question and comment? What has been the protocol for identifying these concerns? Well, who has it gone to and who's tracking it?
The concern that was just raised?
Yes. And like pieces of information. In other words, is there a receptivity? Is there someone that's going, is there a responsive individual that's going to, and who's tracking it and who's following up on it?
The supervisor's meeting tomorrow, I'll bring it directly to them, and then we'll just look at the 2 documents side by side.
Oh, I think Ginny's question is broader than that, right?
Well,
I
if
mean,
there's-
there
if
is a
there's more than-
coordinator of gifted.
No, that's not my
Oh,
question. I mean,
okay.
I want to know who have the parents been told to go to?
Right.
And so who's collecting the information and making certain that there is some kind of assessment of need to change or not, as opposed to just us hearing that there may be a discrepancy of a deep treatment of the subject at a lower grade, that it's being more broadly treated at a higher grade, and there may be discrepancies in information that's being delivered.
Right, so I think I would go back, so certainly parents can bring that to either the principal of their school or to the supervisor of gifted. But I would argue, it's also, tonight's an appropriate time. We're presenting the curriculum for the first time, and so if there is something that hasn't been brought up, because, maybe a parent thinks of that when it comes up in their kitchen at night, but they don't go to a supervisor to tell them about that story.
Right.
When we talk about a new proposed one, I think that's a great question to ask. Did we make sure we looked at it to make sure that the students aren't learning one thing in gifted third grade, and then in fourth grade something that's, just as you described it, broader and perhaps not as specific as what they had learned. So it's a good question, and Mr. Pinero is here, and as he said, he's meeting tomorrow with supervisors, so we can check on that tomorrow.
Well, could we at least establish some contact point? Because it sounded to me like this was just one of multiple things. Maybe it's only the one that's been identified. I just don't know.
Sure, I do think, my
I
understanding
don't want to have to
is-
remember it.
My understanding is certainly the Association of the Parents of Students in the Gifted Program, you do meet with Mr. Dolks, is my understanding, and you do communicate with him. Right, so that certainly is a method, and Mr. Dolks certainly talks to Mr. Pinero, so I think
So it seems to
that's-
me that that's the appropriate
Yes,
chain.
yeah.
Thank you. Just want to make sure somebody's doing something about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mr.
Yes.
Ann Carey,
Yes.
Mark Friedman,
Yes.
Brendan Gallagher,
Yes.
Roseanne Kursted,
Yes.
Ginny Light,
Yes.
Gretchen Oley,
Yes.
Mitch Slater.
Yes.
Anything else?
That's all.
All right, finance, Mark.
I'd like the board to consider finance items numbers 1 through 12.
Second?
Mitch, thank you. Just a couple of comments. We would like to thank the Westfield Coalition for the Arts for a number of, 4 different gifts, actually. One was for $1,250 to the Westfield's Music Department for staff members to attend the conference. Another one to the Roosevelt Intermediate School's Art Department to purchase 2 hot wire cutters and supplies. Also to Westfield, $2,530 to the Westfield High School, Roosevelt, and Edison Intermediate Schools to purchase 3 drum sets with hardware and cases. And then another one for $830 to the Roosevelt Intermediate School's Music Department to purchase 3 amplifiers. So thank you very much for that. And then another gift from an anonymous donor of $5,000 to Franklin School to purchase books, supplies, and classroom materials. Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Dana, please.
Rich Matesic,
Yes.
Ann Carey,
Yes.
Mark Friedman,
Yes.
Brendan Gallagher,
Yes.
Roseanne Kursted,
Yes.
Ginny Light,
Yes.
Gretchen Oley,
Yes.
Mitch Slater.
Yes.
And we have a finance committee meeting Friday morning, 8 a.m. That's it,
As in this Friday?
as in this Friday.
Thank you. Legislation and anything?
No report.
All right, technology, Mitch?
We have a meeting December 5th, and we'll have a report after that.
Thank you. I'd ask the board to note the notes for the record, and move to any unfinished business. Any new business? Any liaison reports? Jeannie?
I attended the PTC President's meeting on November 13th. Number of questions were answered about transportation. There was a question, and I do need clarification on the reimbursement of the cost of, if a family sends a child to a private school and they take care of their own transportation, there is an amount of money that they are given by the district
Correct.
in lieu of transportation.
Correct.
And what I can't remember is if that is, if the board has that as a separate line item that is reimbursed by the state or not.
It's a
That-
separate line item. It's no longer fully reimbursed by the state. It used to be. It no longer is.
Is it partially reimbursed?
Sometimes, not every year.
So is it a mandated,
Yes, it's mandated $884
okay,
per child
okay,
within certain miles. If the school is over, I think it's 20 miles or 20-something miles, they don't get the reimbursement, but it is mandated within that mileage.
Okay, so it's another unfunded mandate.
Yes.
Thank you. I think that's it. That's it.
All right. Any other liaison reports? Thank you, Ginny. I would now recognize the public for questions and/or comments on any topic. All right. Seeing no one come to the podium, I would ask the board to approve the following resolutions. Resolve that the Board of Education move into private session for the purpose of discussing a possible harassment, intimidation, and bullying incident. And if further resolved that any discussion held by the board which need not remain confidential and the results of the discussion will be made public as soon as practicable. Could I have a second? Thank you, Ginny. Any comments? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstain? All right, we'll move to private session. Thank you, everyone.